Hello, my name is Amber. This is a picture of my mother when she was making this, and we have always called this our New Year's bread. This recipe, we have named it simply because it has always been made and served on New Year's Day.
I know there's a heritage to the bread going back to my great-grandparents and them coming as children from Germany.
That coffee cake was an important thing. It was more important than I thought it was, I think, you know.
One person is designated to make the bread, and right now that's my mom. And we'll see who picks up that torch when it moves on.
So we're gonna start out with 1.5 cups of warm milk. And I am going to be adding my butter, 2 tablespoons and 2 teaspoons.
Was raised on the farm, and the dairy was important to us because we always took our Holsteins to the fair. The first time we went, we got Grand Champion, and then we took Grand Champion for the next 11 years.
Your milk has been heated and it needs to come back to room temperature. I am mixing this a little bit because I want to get the butter completely incorporated into the milk. The next ingredient that we're going to put in here, we have 1/4 cup of sugar and 1/2 teaspoon of salt. So now the next ingredient, which makes it special to me or to my family, and that is nutmeg.
I think the most important part is the nutmeg. The ground nutmeg you would think would be stronger and more potent. You have to use 2 to 3 times as much of that. And one time I made it wrong using the same amount, and the bread was ruined because it didn't have a taste of the nutmeg.
In my opinion, you really can't get too much in there. The next ingredient that we need to work with is the yeast. It just takes about 1/4 cup of warm water. We're measuring out 1.5 teaspoons of yeast. Yeast grows just a little bit more quickly if you add a little bit of honey to it. So I'll put a little bit of honey in there, and we'll take a moment to watch this grow. We'll go ahead and add this into our liquids, our milk, and stir it, stir. Pour this into our mixing bowl, and this is where we'll be adding the flour.
Probably the earliest memory was where this bread was cooling out on the porch, because if we did go down to the farm for New Year's, this bread would be made and then it needed to cool off.
So this recipe calls for 3 3/4 cups of flour. The last 1/2 cup of flour that I add to this, I need to add that rather gradually, because once that flour's in there, there's no getting it out. Okay, now this dough is still just a little bit sticky, but we're gonna put it out here. So you want to get underneath there and grab that flour and push it up onto the bread. So now is the time when we get our hands in here. Our mother made bread probably a couple times a week at least. She actually wound up with carpal tunnel and had to have surgery on both hands, and because she needed her bread always by hand.
How she made things, and she used her hands a lot. Measuring was secondary. She didn't use a lot of utensils. They were strong, yet they looked so fragile at the same time.
She didn't expect us to always help. All we knew was the excitement of it coming out of the oven and then her decorating it.
Well, my mother in general was, she was really considered her family ahead of herself.
We'll be covering that with saran, and we'll let that rise, and just at room temperature, and that's probably another at least an hour for this to rise. Then once this rises, you are going to knead it down one more time, and I usually have to pat it a few times because otherwise there might be some air bubbles on it. And then we would be putting it in a round pan. Be very generous with the amount of butter that you put in here. Never can use too much butter. Then in the oven it goes. So now take a look at how pretty we make this. The glaze does call for 2.5 cups of powdered sugar and 3 tablespoons of half and half. We always flavored the glaze with and almond flavoring. The important thing is that you get this mix to the texture that you want. This doesn't have to be covered completely. Let it run down the edges. As far as the garnish, we use our maraschino cherries. And to be honest with you, I'm not 100% sure why we cut these maraschinos in half. Knowing my mother and how conservative she was, maraschino cherries were expensive and she just tried to make them go twice as far. I'm not really sure.
I know a lot of people say, well, I just can't stand those maraschino cherries, but I love them myself, you know, and I thought they should put more of them on there.
I think just getting that color on there, and if they're just on there and random, that's fine too. The pecans, they must be whole. Don't put pieces on. That would be cheating. Most important, make sure when you are having a piece of this, you put a nice lot of butter on it. We like our butter. Food and taste, I think, brings back memories.
Just remembering the people who made it and the people who enjoyed it and gathered in as a family to celebrate the new year.
I'm just delighted that our kids enjoy it. My grandchildren look forward to it.
I just think of legacy and how, you know, the bread isn't that important. It's more the family gathering around a recipe. And I think that that's a big part of life, is using food and gathering as a way to celebrate and enjoy life together.
What's so great about it? Well, we like it, again, because we've always had